Cheating wife story, mistake that she had to pay a heavy price. Rick was taken aback to learn that Lori had known about the affair and had even tried to warn Cindy. It deepened his hurt. Before you were with Bennett, you were warned and you still didn't stop. You didn't tell me you were struggling. You just kept going, Rick said, his voice breaking as tears welled up in his eyes. Hey, how's your day going? Thanks for stopping by Reddit Cheating Stories and listening to our story. Let's get started with today's story. That day, I never expected to witness such a horrifying sight. Cindy, the wife I loved and trusted completely, was in another man's arms. My heart shattered when I heard her whisper, "Not here, baby. Wait until we're back in the room." All my love, trust, and hope vanished in an instant. How could she betray me like this? I stood there, devastated, unable to believe my eyes. Cindy turned around, her face pale with panic. "Rick, no, don't." But it was too late. In that moment, I had lost everything. Cindy had met Rick Thomas during their junior year of college, and the two quickly fell in love. Rick was full of life, always energetic, and had a way of making Cindy laugh. He was creative with his surprises, always finding ways to make her feel special. They enjoyed taking long Sunday walks together or sneaking into empty classrooms on campus to talk for hours. Handsome and kind, Rick seemed to be the perfect mix. Cindy's parents adored him, and his family loved Cindy. Rick's sister Kathy even joked once, "If he ever breaks up with you, we'll miss him more than you will." By the end of their last semester, Rick landed a job with a prominent investment firm on the West Coast. Cindy, with her education degree, began searching for teaching jobs near Rick in Anaheim. She eventually got hired to teach 7th grade math in Orange County. To celebrate, Rick took her to a romantic dinner in San Clemente with a breathtaking ocean view. Just before dessert, he got down on one knee and proposed with a beautiful heirloom ring that had belonged to his grandmother. Cindy cried tears of joy and hugged Rick tightly, whispering, "Yes, yes, forever yes," as the surrounding diners applauded. Fast forward 9 years. Cindy, now 32, was a mother to 6-year-old twins, Michael and Sarah. She continued teaching, but was growing tired of the low pay and long hours. Though she loved certain aspects of her job, dealing with difficult parents and being away from her family made her consider quitting. Cindy and Rick had managed their finances wisely, so leaving her job would be possible even if it took some time to find a new path. It only took 5 months, and it happened entirely by chance. Cindy remained close friends with Kelly, whom she had met during her freshman year of college. They were roommates throughout their college years and even lived together during Cindy's engagement to Rick. While Cindy was adventurous, Kelly was even more daring and spontaneous. However, Kelly often acted without thinking about the consequences, leaving Cindy to save her from trouble. Kelly would get upset initially, but later thanked Cindy for always being such a good friend. One day in late January, Kelly called Cindy and asked her to be her date to a wedding in Napa in 3 weeks. Kelly's boss was getting married, and she thought it would be fun. "This will be so much fun, Cindy," Kelly said. "Lots of wine, dancing, and good-looking young professionals." Cindy laughed. "I'm married with twins, Kelly." "Fun for whom?" "Oh, don't be such a spoil sport," Kelly replied. "Take a break from Rick and the kids. It might be good for you." Cindy protested. "Rick is plenty of fun. Why can't I bring him?" "Sorry, but the invitation says guest, not guests," Kelly said, wishing Cindy could loosen up a bit more. Cindy promised to check with Rick and get back to her. That evening, Cindy talked to Rick about it. He wasn't surprised. "You should go and keep an eye on Kelly," he said. "I'm sure it'll be fun, and maybe you can pick up some wine for us too." When Cindy asked about the kids, Rick said, "I've been wanting to visit Mom and Dad. They haven't seen the grandkids in 4 months, so I'm sure they'll love having them for a long weekend. Go, help Kelly, and enjoy a break." Cindy felt fortunate to have such a supportive husband. 3 weeks later, Cindy found herself at a fancy winery in Napa, watching Kelly dance with a much younger groomsman. While keeping an eye on her carefree friend, Cindy struck up a conversation with one of the bride's cousins, Sally. They chatted about weddings and agreed this one wasn't particularly well organized. Sally mentioned that someone could make a lot of money as a professional event coordinator. Cindy's mind started racing with ideas as she pondered how to pull Kelly away from her dance partner. 6 months later, Cindy launched her own event planning business. We plan, you play. Naturally organized and detail-oriented, Cindy was well prepared for her new career. Her teaching experience, which had involved creating flawless lesson plans, translated easily into planning weddings, reunions, business meetings, and other events. She researched successful companies, found her niche, and pursued her new passion with unstoppable energy. Within 2 years, she had become a success, specializing in intimate coastal weddings along California's scenic coastline. It was during this time that she met Bennett Davis. Bennett owned 3 upscale boutique hotels, ideal for destination weddings. His properties were located in San Diego, Santa Barbara, and the Monterey Peninsula. Hard-working and dedicated, Bennett had a reputation for excellence and treated his staff exceptionally well. At 26, he had taken a huge risk by purchasing an old mansion in Santa Barbara. With minimal funds and a rough start, he worked over 100 hours a week for 2 years to turn his dream into a reality. The hotel almost failed because word about it spread very slowly, but by the 3rd year, it broke even and profits began to roll in during the 4th year. 3 years after that, Bennett opened a hotel in San Diego, and 2 years later, one in Monterey. 14 years later, Bennett remained deeply committed to his business. Though he worked long hours, he also enjoyed life. He loved good wine, dancing, and lively company. People referred to him as a confirmed bachelor, meaning he had no interest in long-term relationships. He was honest and fair in his dealings, and at 40, he was content with his life and confident in who he was. 16 months before Cindy's crisis, Bennett and his head of staff, Lori Templeton, attended a hospitality industry event at the LA Convention Center. That's where they came across Cindy Thomas and her We Plan, You Play display. Bennett later admitted that he was impressed by both her presentation and her bright blue eyes, which hinted at a playful personality. Cindy, on the other hand, noticed Bennett for his good looks and the fact that he didn't come across as arrogant. They struck up a conversation and immediately hit it off. Bennett's questions were both tough and casual. He asked about her track record, her key staff, how she collaborated with property leaders, her best and worst events, and how she calculated overhead costs and profits. Then, he shifted to lighter topics, her favorite wine, whether she could dance, and if she preferred the beach or the mountains. Despite noticing her wedding ring, Bennett enjoyed the friendly chat. Cindy responded enthusiastically, listing Pinot Noir from Willamette Valley, particularly the 2014 Evening Land Lane source from Eola Amity Hills, as her favorite wine. She admitted she could waltz if necessary, but preferred the Carlton, Twist, or Tango, though only with her husband. She smiled warmly as she shared that she loved mountains in the summer and quiet beaches in the winter. Lori Templeton, watching with a knowing grin, could tell her boss was genuinely intrigued. Bennett, who always maintained a polite and friendly demeanor, leaned in slightly, signaling his deeper interest. As they wrapped up, Bennett invited Cindy to join him and Lori for dinner at Fogo de Chao later that evening. Lori noticed he formally referred to her as Mrs. Templeton, an unusual choice, which Lori interpreted as Bennett's way of keeping his intentions proper. Cindy politely declined, explaining that she needed to get home to see her husband Rick and their twins before bedtime. However, she expressed interest in visiting one of Bennett's hotels. They agreed that she would tour his favorite property in Santa Barbara the following week. Lori and Cindy exchanged phone numbers before parting ways, and Cindy shook both their hands warmly. As they walked away, Lori couldn't resist glancing at Bennett. "What?" he asked innocently. "I assume you noticed the ring on her left hand, boss," Lori replied knowingly. "Well, a guy can flirt sometimes, can't he?" Bennett said, feigning hurt. Lori smirked but replied, "Oh, is that what it was?" Cindy's visit to the hotel was a complete success. She had planned to meet Bennett and Lori for lunch. Though her home in Orange County was only about 120 miles away, Cindy allowed herself 4 hours to make the trip. She arrived in just under 3 hours, leaving her enough time to visit the nearby Mission, just 15 minutes from the hotel. True to her punctual nature, she arrived at the hotel at 11:45 a.m. The parking attendant greeted her warmly, saying, "Welcome to the Winfield Scott Hotel, Mrs. Thomas." Hearing her name made Cindy feel reassured about the quality of service she was about to experience. As she ascended the short flight of stairs into the elegant lobby, she spotted Bennett Davis waiting for her. He wore neatly pressed khaki pants, a crisp dark blue shirt, and fine Italian leather shoes with a matching belt. His attire complemented his rugged good looks, and Cindy couldn't help but notice. Normally, Cindy rarely paid attention to men other than her husband Rick, not because she was shy or oblivious, but because she found Rick so attractive that few others compared. Yet Bennett was different. He might even be better looking, which caught her off guard. She also noticed that Lori wasn't with him. "So glad you could make it, Cindy. I can't wait to show you around and discuss how a partnership could benefit us both," Bennett said, extending his hand. "Thanks, Bennett. At first glance, this place looks stunning," Cindy replied, shaking his hand with a warm smile. Neither of them may have realized it yet, but their connection, which began at the convention in LA, was genuine. They shared mutual admiration for hard work and success, a dislike for pretense, and a natural charm. Both were undeniably attractive, which didn't hurt. For the meeting, Cindy had chosen a simple, yet elegant light black sundress with no sleeves, accentuated by a pastel scarf that highlighted her bright blue eyes. The dress ended just above her knees, revealing a tasteful glimpse of her long legs. Her stylish yet comfortable sandals added a bit of height. Cindy's practical side knew that looks could make a difference in business, especially with men like Bennett. Her friends often described her as innocent as a dove but sly as a fox, a blend of charm and intelligence that served her well. She took Bennett's arm and began asking about the property as they walked into the hotel lobby. It seemed every staff member knew her name. When they arrived at a table on the patio for lunch, a small vase of Californian wildflowers served as a centerpiece. The vibrant colors popped against the crisp white tablecloth and the ocean backdrop. A bottle of Pinot Noir, which Cindy had mentioned as her favorite when they first met, was also waiting. As Bennett pulled out her chair, Cindy thought, "This guy is good. I need to stay sharp so I don't get taken advantage of." They chatted about her drive, the recent wildfires, and the stunning ocean view. 10 minutes later, Lori arrived, smiling warmly and carrying a small folder for their meeting. Cindy stood up and hugged her, genuinely happy to see her. While Bennett had impressed Cindy, she already liked Lori and appreciated her professionalism. The three of them talked for 45 minutes over lunch before shifting to business. Cindy limited herself to 1.5 glasses of wine to stay focused and demonstrate she was serious about her work. After lunch, Lori excused herself, leaving Bennett to give Cindy a tour of the Winfield Scott Hotel. Cindy had done her homework and knew the hotel was named after a shipwreck off the Santa Barbara coast in 1853, rumored to have lost a fortune in gold. She joked, "Maybe you found the gold," to which Bennett smiled, winked, and replied, "That's not the kind of treasure I want." They laughed and continued their tour. Later, Lori rejoined them, and the three headed to Bennett's office to discuss detailed plans. By late afternoon, they had finalized several agreements for Cindy to bring weddings and family reunions to Bennett's hotels. Everyone seemed satisfied with the possibilities. When their business was concluded, Bennett arranged for Cindy's white VW Passat to be brought around. Lori said her goodbyes, leaving Cindy and Bennett for a final moment. Bennett shook her hand warmly, holding it slightly longer than necessary. "It's been a pleasure spending time with you today and getting to know you better. I know we can do great business together, but I'm also glad to know you as a person." He leaned in and gave her a polite kiss on the cheek. Cindy smiled and thanked him for the day, saying she would follow up with Lori about upcoming weddings. As she drove away, a strange sensation lingered. Cindy realized she had been very attracted to Bennett. She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts, but couldn't stop replaying moments from the day. Bennett standing at the top of the steps, the thoughtful details he had arranged, and the kiss on the cheek. Flustered, she tried to focus. Still distracted, she glanced in the rearview mirror before changing lanes and noticed a book in the back seat. It was one of Sarah's favorites, left behind. The familiar sight snapped Cindy back to reality. "Oh, girl," she thought, "you've been spending too much time with Kelly. You're not a teenager. You're a happily married woman. Get your head straight." Cindy felt genuinely disturbed by her thoughts. She had an amazing husband and 2 beautiful children. There was no room in her life for acting like a giddy teenager or flirting with anyone other than Rick. After 20 minutes of guilt, she turned on a podcast about women's roles in business to distract herself. But deep down, she knew she was playing with fire. Back at the hotel, Bennett returned to his office to address some business matters quickly. Then he went to his suite to relax for an hour before his evening beach run. Stripping off his clothes, he lay on the bed, replaying the day in his mind, especially Cindy. She was extraordinary inside and out. Bennett had been with many attractive women, but none like Cindy. Her sparkling eyes, her personality, her graceful walk, and her incredible legs lingered in his thoughts. Despite her being married, he couldn't help but admire her. Then he did something rare for him. He allowed himself to imagine her and felt a rush of pleasure. Meanwhile, Rick was at home with Michael and Sarah, making dinner. As he cooked and laughed with their kids, he thought about Cindy and realized how lucky he was. When Cindy returned home, the table was set, and they enjoyed a wonderful meal together. Sarah talked about finding the neighbor's cat, Ralph, and playing with him before Mrs. Bowling came to retrieve him. She even wondered if they could get a pet of their own. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, Cindy took a hot bath, slipped into nice pajamas, and shared an intimate moment with Rick. For a fleeting second, she imagined it was Bennett instead. 6 months later, after 4 weddings at the Winfield Scott Hotel, a line was crossed. Perhaps it began with an accidental touch, or maybe it was Bennett's hand on her back as he held a door open. It might have been the extra time they spent together, as Bennett always visited when Cindy's company was present. Whatever the catalyst, Cindy never resisted his gestures or compliments. Rick, who had only visited the hotel once early on, wasn't there to notice the growing tension. It was almost 1 a.m. Cindy and Lori had just said goodbye to a happy bride's parents after another successful wedding. The cleanup team was nearly finished, and Cindy and Lori sat on the patio with a glass of champagne they had saved from the reception. "I know it's late," Lori said, kicking off her shoes, "but can we talk for a minute?" "Sure," Cindy said, copying her and rubbing her toes. "What's up?" "You know I enjoy working with you and consider you a friend, right?" Lori asked hesitantly. Cindy nodded, curious where this was heading. "I don't usually get involved in people's personal lives, but I need to tell you something. Is that okay?" Cindy nodded again. "You know he'll try to be with you if you let him," Lori said softly. Cindy raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond. Lori continued, "I care about both of you. From the day we met in LA, I knew you were the type Bennett likes. You're beautiful inside and out, and that drives him crazy. He's only kept his distance because he respects you in your marriage. He may think being with you secretly wouldn't hurt, but he knows it could. He's great at thinking ahead in business, and he won't push it unless he thinks you want it." Cindy listened closely, though it was hard to meet Lori's serious gaze. "Cindy, I don't see how you can be with Bennett and keep your life the same. He won't marry you or take you from Rick. You won't leave your husband, keep the kids, and sail into a happy ending. Bennett isn't a bad guy. He'll probably stay your friend for life. He's impressed by you, but not enough to settle down. You need to decide if you want your family as it is, or a fling that will likely ruin your marriage." Tears welled in Cindy's eyes as she replied, "Oh, Lori, I'm so confused. I don't know what to do. Rick is amazing. Even after 10 years, we laugh, talk seriously, and are great together. He supports and challenges me in all the right ways. I can't picture my life without him. The idea of hurting him makes me feel sick." Her voice trailed off as she searched for the right words. "But Bennett," she paused. "He's exciting in a way Rick isn't. There's something sort of dangerous about him, but it draws me in. It makes me want him deeply in every possible way." She took a deep breath and sipped her champagne. Lori waited quietly, giving her space to think. "I've never felt so out of control in my life. I fell in love with Rick quickly, but it wasn't overwhelming. With Bennett, it's overwhelming. When he looks at me, touches my hand, or even just leans in close, I melt inside. If the moment was right, and he led me to his bed, I go willingly." She continued, 6 months ago, I would have been angry if someone said I might want someone more than my husband or that I could have an affair. I'm not someone who thinks it's okay to cheat and expect the other person to stay faithful. Marriage is a commitment. I've tried to imagine Rick telling me he's been with someone else, and it breaks my heart. So why am I being such a hypocrite and risking everything? What are you going to do? Lori asked gently, feeling sad for her friend's struggle. Well, 80% of me says I'm staying faithful to my husband and kids, Cindy began. I won't stop working with you because it's a good business deal. That 80% tells me I can resist the desire. But the other 20% says, forget it, just do it. It tells me I can keep it a secret and let it pass, then get back to normal. Honestly, most days I hope the 80% wins. But there are moments. She put her head in her hands and began to cry. Lori stood up, walked to Cindy's side of the table, and hugged her friend tightly. You know the truth and the risks. I really hope you make the right choices, Lori said quietly. The next day, Lori walked into Bennett's office without knocking. She had a stern look on her face and locked eyes with him. If you touch her, I'll quit and never work for you again. And don't think you can hide it from me. I've worked with you for almost 7 years. I'll know even if you try to keep it a secret. She turned and left, almost slamming the door behind her. 3 weeks later, a big storm nearly ruined an outdoor wedding. Everyone scrambled to move things indoors, with Cindy and Lori shouting directions. Hours later, after midnight, the event was finally over, and everyone had retreated to their rooms. Cindy and Bennett stood on the patio, hidden in the shadows. Bennett put his arm around Cindy, sensing she was upset despite the event's success. He admired her relentless pursuit of perfection. Holding her gently, he said, "You did your best. You can't control the weather, and people still had a good time." It was almost 1 a.m. Cindy and Lori had just said goodbye to the happy bride's parents after another successful wedding. The cleanup team was nearly finished, and Cindy and Lori sat on the patio with a glass of champagne they had saved from the reception. In a few years, they'll laugh about it, Lori said, kicking off her shoes. Cindy didn't respond. Instead, she leaned her head on Bennett's chest. It felt good, safe and comforting, and her resolve began to weaken. She sighed deeply and looked up into Bennett's eyes. Before leaning in to kiss her, he said, "Think about this carefully. I won't push you. You have to want this as much as I do. If not, let's stay friends and business partners. We might always wonder what if, but if it's not mutual, we should stop now." In the next moment, Cindy's resolve dissolved, and she stepped over the line. "Take me to bed," she said softly. Bennett kissed her with passion, and their hands began to explore each other. Cindy moaned as he held her close. Without wasting another minute, Bennett scooped her into his arms. She gasped at his caring yet strong touch as he carried her to the back door of his bedroom, kissing her deeply the entire way. Neither of them noticed Lori standing on the upper deck of the patio, looking down with a tear in her eye. Inside the bedroom, things grew more intense. Bennett didn't place her gently on the bed the way Rick would have. For the next 2 hours, they whispered sweet words, spoke softly, and touched gently. Soon, their passion reignited, and they moved together on the bed. They were close in the shower, then on his small desk, and Cindy whispered that he belonged to her. By 4:30 a.m., they were exhausted, lying quietly in each other's arms, basking in the afterglow. They talked about how to keep their secret, discussing ways to hide it. Bennett worried she might feel guilty and not want to continue, but Cindy assured him she could handle her emotions and wanted to see him again without anyone knowing. They kissed one last time before she showered alone and prepared to return to her room. As he listened to the water and her humming, staying out of the shower was one of the hardest things Bennett had ever done. Cindy kissed him goodnight and said she would go home after catching a few hours of sleep. Though she wanted to rest until the afternoon, she knew that would raise suspicion. Bennett promised to say goodbye when she left. Cindy slipped back to her room, set her alarm, and fell asleep immediately. Meanwhile, Bennett stripped the sheets off the bed, washed them, remade the bed, and was asleep before the staff arrived at 6:30 a.m. Cindy got home Sunday afternoon. Sarah and Michael ran to meet her, wrapping their arms around her waist as soon as she stepped out of the car. They were almost 8 years old and growing fast. Although Cindy had only been gone since Friday, they had a lot to share. Daddy took us to the big park, and we went down the giant slide. Ralph came back, and Mrs. Bowling brought us cookies when she picked him up. Daddy made Mickey Mouse pancakes for breakfast, and he said maybe next week we could go to Disneyland. Mommy, did your dad ever take you to Disneyland? The question made her pause. It reminded her of conversations she had just 12 hours ago. And yes, last night's activities were still fresh in her mind. Cindy felt awkward when she saw Rick standing in the doorway, wiping his hands with a dish towel. He wore Adidas shorts and a cycling shirt. He looked so good. What am I doing, she thought. What she said as she put her bag down and hugged him was, "Hey baby, it was a tough wedding. I'm so glad to be home and in your arms. I hope the twins weren't too wild." He smiled and replied, "We always miss you, Cinderella, but I love spending time with the kids on weekends. I'm so happy you're doing well in your business. I saw the weather and figured you were busy. Let me get you a glass of wine and rub your feet." Cindy thought, his pet name for me. Loving the kids, supporting me. I can't lose him or this family. Out loud, she said, "Wine and a foot rub? That sounds perfect." Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, they took their wine and conversation to the hot tub. Rick, feeling tired, said he needed a break, but offered to massage her back until she fell asleep. Cindy pretended to be slightly disappointed, but admitted she was also exhausted. She didn't explain why, and he didn't ask because he trusted her completely. On Monday, Rick asked if she wanted to go out Tuesday evening. She quickly said yes. Early Tuesday morning, while Cindy still slept, Rick secretly packed some things for both of them. Before leaving for work, he left her a note. "Dress nicely for date night, Cinderella. Wear the bright blue sundress that shows off your legs, if you don't mind. Be ready by 4 p.m. No worries about the kids. It's all set up. Underwear optional." At 4 p.m., they hugged the kids and thanked Kelly, who was in town and happy to babysit. Then they got in the car and drove off. Rick took Cindy to the Ritz-Carlton overlooking Dana Point. Cindy was amazed when they arrived. "Kelly is spending the night?" she asked. "Yep," Rick replied. "I didn't bring a change of clothes." "Well, I hope you won't need many, but you do have a bag in the trunk." While you were with the kids, Kelly double-checked it. "She might have changed what you'll wear to bed tonight. You let her into my lingerie drawer?" "Yep." She said it was a bit boring, but she found something bright pink she thought would work. "And she said she'd take you shopping for more?" "You rascal." They took a long walk on the beach, had a wonderful dinner, and shared a close moment for over an hour. Late at night, around midnight, Cindy and her husband Rick sat on their 6th-floor balcony, looking out at the calm Pacific Ocean. They talked about their lives, dreams, and future. Rick shared some big news. He was in line for a partnership at work, which meant more money and less travel. He even mentioned joining her on some of her wedding planning weekends. It was dark, and they both looked at the ocean, so Rick couldn't see Cindy's face. If he had, he might have noticed something was wrong. Cindy quickly got up and sat in his lap, saying, "I'm so proud of you, Richard Michael Thomas." She kissed him all over his face, and they shared an intimate moment on the balcony. The next morning, they had breakfast in bed and continued their conversation. "Babe, I'm so proud of your coming promotion, and I'd love for you to travel with me sometimes," Cindy said. "But I hope you don't think I should stop my business just because we can afford it now." "Never," Rick replied. "I know how much you love it. Your career is just as important to me as mine. You're amazing at what you do, and I want you to keep going as far as you want." Cindy thought to herself, "How did I find such an amazing guy? I can't mess this up. Bennett and I need to make sure our plan is solid." She didn't think about logic or love, only about enjoying her life. She didn't feel guilty. She just wanted to live her dream. In years to come, she would wonder how she could have been so selfish. Usually, people said men thought with the wrong head, but Cindy was doing the same thing. She was in her mid-30s, and her desires were rising. She somehow convinced herself she could have it all without anyone getting hurt. Cindy was sure she and Bennett would eventually end things in a few years. They shared a deep connection, but Bennett would never fall completely in love, and Cindy wouldn't leave her family. Bennett would find someone else, and Cindy would live a happy life with her husband. She imagined her twins growing up, going to college, getting married, and having grandkids. She couldn't have imagined the trouble that was coming. The next month, Rick got promoted to partner. Cindy had another wedding job at a hotel in San Diego. She talked with her lover Bennett about how to keep their affair secret. Cindy had been on birth control for 2 years. She and Rick had decided they were happy with 2 wonderful kids, so being with Bennett once or twice a month felt safe. But things started to unravel in late June. Cindy and Bennett were in his office discussing their business deal. Bennett had offered extra money if Cindy brought in more business than expected. They were lovers, but business was still business. Cindy reminded Bennett of their deal. Bennett agreed, though he admitted he had underestimated her skills. Just then, Lori walked in. "I'm glad I caught you both together," Lori said, sitting down without waiting for an invitation. "Bennett, remember our talk from months ago? I said if you two got involved, I'd quit." Cindy looked shocked and then sad. Bennett stayed calm. Lori continued, "I didn't think you'd ignore my warning, but I saw you both that stormy night. Bennett took Cindy to bed right in front of me. It was one of the saddest moments of my life. Not just for me, but for what it would do to both of you." Lori went on, "I can't be part of this. Cindy, you're acting selfishly like a teenager. I started looking for a new job that Monday. It took a while, but I found a great offer in Austin, Texas. I'll start there in early August, working for an event planning company." Then she looked at Cindy. "Remember, I warned you. This trouble isn't here yet, but it will catch up with you. You're being unfaithful to the vows you took when you married Rick. He doesn't deserve this. I won't bring up your kids because just thinking about the harm this could cause them makes me want to cry." Lori finished by saying, "I'll stay professional. I'll honor my work commitments, but please, only talk to me about work from now on. The staff here doesn't deserve to be caught up in this mess. I'll tell them I couldn't turn down the offer, and I'm sure you'll find a good replacement. Your head bartender, Sharon, could be a good pick, but that's up to you. Thank you for 7 great years. I wish you both the best." With that, she stood up and left the room. Tears streamed down Cindy's face while Bennett hung his head, muttering, "This is awful." They sat in silence for a few minutes as a light breeze drifted through the open French doors. They had planned to spend the evening together, but now that wasn't going to happen. Neither of them knew what to say. Cindy finally dried her eyes. "Bennett, I'm going home. Now isn't the time to figure things out. We're both at fault, but I'm sorry for my part in this mess. I'll call you in a few days." She got up, walked out of his office, and left the hotel. She asked the valet to bring her car, explaining she had to leave unexpectedly. Driving back to Orange County, she cried the entire way and checked into the Courtyard Marriott using her business credit card, knowing Rick never looked at those statements. On the way, she stopped to buy a bottle of whiskey. After checking into her room, she drank until she fell asleep. The first cracks in her world had begun to appear. True to her word, Lori left for Austin 10 days after finishing her notice. Bennett didn't try to stop her or offer more money. He knew it would only make things worse. He attempted to talk about it once or twice, but Lori wouldn't listen. "There's nothing you can say, Bennett," she replied. Cindy wanted to call Lori, but couldn't find the words. Instead, she texted, "I'm sorry for how my actions hurt you. You warned me, but I can't let this go." By early September, things between Bennett and Cindy were tense, possibly from guilt or because Lori's departure weighed heavily on them. However, their desire for each other didn't fade, and by October, things had returned to their previous intensity. One Saturday, after a morning wedding, they took an unusually long drive up the coast in Bennett's BMW convertible. They stopped at a secluded cabin overlooking the ocean. "Oh my, it's beautiful," Cindy said, hugging him. He picked her up and carried her inside. "The French doors in the bedroom open to an ocean view," he said. "Then take me upstairs so we can look at the ocean," she replied with a smile. Upstairs, Bennett laid her on the bed and slid her leggings down. "You've been teasing me all day," he murmured. "Yes, I've been so bad. Make me pay for it," Cindy whispered. She relished these moments when Bennett took control, focusing entirely on the present and shutting out thoughts of her marriage. She had told Rick she was scouting locations in Monterey and wouldn't be back until late Sunday. This was partially true. She just didn't mention she'd be traveling with Bennett. Sunday morning was spent in bed, walking along the beach and enjoying brunch. They lingered a few hours longer before heading back, stopping in Big Sur for a glass of wine. Driving south, Cindy felt invincible. Her business was thriving, her kids were happy, and she had 2 men in her life. Lori's warnings seemed irrelevant. It had been 15 months since she met Bennett and 8 months since their affair began. Cindy convinced herself her secret relationship was even making her a better wife. She had no idea how wrong she was. In December, Cindy coordinated a wedding at Bennett's Monterey Hotel. The venue was ideal for intimate events, and the Carlisle wedding had just 38 guests, making it manageable for Cindy. Not all the rooms were booked, so Bennett didn't notice a particular reservation. A Mr. Thomas had booked a suite with an ocean view, a large tub, and a king-size bed. Rick, now a partner at his investment firm, had planned a surprise for his wife. He brought fresh flowers, Cindy's favorite wine, and luxurious oils for a bubble bath. Rick didn't suspect his marriage was in jeopardy, but felt they were drifting apart. He attributed it to work stress and parenting, but was about to discover the real reason. None of the local staff knew Rick, so it was easy for him to remain unnoticed until after the rehearsal dinner. While Cindy wrapped up her work, Rick stayed out of sight, even seeing Bennett a few times without revealing himself. He considered telling Bennett about his plan, but decided against it. An hour after the dinner, Rick hadn't seen Cindy in the lobby. He decided to look for her, but couldn't find her in the dining room or on the patio. Hearing voices nearby, he recognized Cindy's playful tone. Just as he rounded the corner, he heard her say, "Not here. Please wait until we get back to your room." Turning the corner, Rick saw something that made his blood run cold. Cindy was pressed against the wall, her hands above her head, and Bennett's hand was under her dress. They didn't notice Rick at first because the hallway was dimly lit, and Cindy was moaning, "Take me to bed and love me all night." Her eyes fluttered open briefly, and she froze when she saw him. "Rick, what? No!" she screamed. Bennett stepped back, his face pale with fear. Rick felt his heart break instantly. He leaned against the wall, tears forming in his eyes. Slowly, he sank to his knees, struggling to comprehend what he had just witnessed. Cindy rushed to him, her face filled with panic and guilt. "Rick, please, what have I done?" she cried. Rick was too stunned to respond, allowing Cindy to hold him as they both sobbed. Bennett stood frozen, looking terrified and unsure of what to do. After a few moments, Rick lifted his head and met Cindy's tearful gaze. With a trembling voice, he managed to say just one word, "Why?" Cindy opened her mouth to answer, but Rick's expression hardened. "No, Cindy," he said, standing and stepping away from her. "Don't talk to me. Don't say anything." Cindy remained on her knees, her eyes pleading for forgiveness, but no words came. Rick turned his attention to Bennett, his face filled with hatred. "Take her back to your room. She's all yours," he said coldly. As Rick began to walk away, Cindy reached out for him. He spun around and shouted, "Don't touch me. You're the mother of my children, and you were everything to me. Now you've destroyed us. Just go with him and leave me alone." Cindy let Rick go, realizing it wasn't the time to explain. The depth of his pain was clear, and she needed to give him space. Overwhelmed, she motioned for Bennett to leave and return to her room. She lay down on the pristine bed with its perfectly arranged white sheets, pillows, and blankets. Trying to steady her breathing, Cindy grappled with the gravity of what she had done. At 34, a wife and mother of twins, she found herself in a mess of her own making, terrified that there was no way out. Meanwhile, Rick sat at the desk in his hotel room, staring blankly for an hour, trying to think clearly. Eventually, he decided to leave. But where could he go? He settled on driving home. He wouldn't arrive before 7 a.m. anyway, and he could head to his office, which would be empty on a Sunday. There, he could shower, shave, and put on clean clothes, giving him a reason for his early return. At least for the sake of the kids, he could pretend for a while. Before leaving, he wrote Cindy a note and left it on the desk. It read, "Cindy, I'm going home to the kids. I don't know what else to do right now, and I need time to think. To say you've crushed my heart and soul would be like calling the Titanic's sinking a minor leak. I'm drowning in despair, unsure of where to turn. When you come home, if you come home, please text me ahead of time. I will leave the moment you arrive. I won't talk to you or look at you until I've had enough time to process what's happened. I will tell the kids I have to go out of town for work this week, but you will be home with them. I hate the idea of leaving them with you, but I have no other choice now. Don't call, text, or reach out to me beyond letting me know you're close. I don't trust you to honor this request. but I hope you have enough decency left to follow this first step toward our end. Actually, you took the first steps when you began seeing your boyfriend, however long ago that was. I loved you with all my heart, mind, and soul, and you threw it all away. Right now, I hate you deeply. How could you? Rick asterisk. An hour after Rick left, Bennett realized he was gone. He found the note and decided to give it to Cindy the next morning. He wanted to hand it to her immediately, but hesitated when he heard her crying through the door. He felt guilt over their affair and knew he had played a part in hurting someone who didn't deserve it. As Cindy's sobs quieted and she seemed to drift off to sleep, Bennett entered her room quietly, placed the note on the bedside table, and stood guard by the door, unsure why he felt the need to stay. Cindy woke at 6 a.m. after tossing and turning for hours. Emotionally drained, she washed her face and used the bathroom. As she exited, she noticed the note on the table. Her heart sank. She always tried to be strong, but seeing the envelope shattered her composure. With trembling hands, she opened it and read Rick's words. Overwhelmed, she collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Hearing her cries, Bennett came in, knelt beside her, and held her as she clung to him. Cindy wanted to blame him, but knew their affair was a mutual decision. She remembered when he had asked her to commit fully or end things, and Lori's repeated warnings. She realized her mistakes were hers alone, and now she had to face the consequences. I'm going home once I've pulled myself together, Bennett. I don't know what will happen, but I need to face what I've done, Cindy said. I know, Bennett replied. I wish things were different, but I admire that you're taking responsibility. If I could take this burden from you, I would, but I know I can't. Just remember, I'm here for you. Thank you, Bennett. I hope this won't hurt you, but who knows? I might call to update you, or we might never speak again. Bennett hugged her as a friend. I understand, he said before leaving the room. He asked the staff to bring Cindy's car and ensure she had privacy, explaining she was dealing with a difficult family situation. Then he left, knowing their chapter was coming to a close. The newer staff agreed and went on with their work, but the veterans, who knew who Mr. Thomas was and what had happened, could feel the heavy silence that filled the air that day. When Cindy was 15 minutes away from home, she texted Rick, 15 minutes out. Can you come back after the kids are asleep, so we can talk? All my fault, but hoping for a way forward. Rick replied, Cindy, I'm ready to go. Kids have had dinner. This is our last contact until I reach out to you, Cindy. Please honor my request. Tears streamed down Cindy's face as she realized he might never call her Cinderella again. She was no longer his loving wife, but someone who had betrayed him deeply. What would become of them? At the end of the longest week of her life, Rick called. Cindy answered quickly. Hi, Rick. I'm glad you called, she said, her voice filled with hope. Rick's tone was flat. Cindy, I'll be coming home this afternoon around 5 p.m. I've somehow managed to keep up with work all week. His voice cracked, and he paused. She waited. I'll try to act normal around the kids for 3 hours. Then I'll sleep in the spare room and won't speak to you until tomorrow when the kids are up. I'll get up early so they don't notice. Is that okay? Yes, Rick, Cindy replied softly. When can we talk? She didn't want to push him, but she needed to know what he was thinking. I arranged for Mrs. Bowling to babysit Sunday afternoon. We can find a private corner of the park to talk then. I think it's best if we spend the whole day with the kids on Saturday, Rick said. We don't know how many more days we'll get with them, if any. Cindy felt like she'd been punched in the stomach at the words, if any. The pain in Rick's voice made her feel sick. Rick had always been strong, even in tough times, but this was harder than anything they'd faced. Betrayal was a cruel master. Okay, honey, Cindy said softly. Cindy, Rick replied, his voice cold and empty. It sent a chill through her. Don't call me honey or baby. We aren't sweethearts anymore. We're two adults in a terrible situation, and there's no waking up from this. Don't use loving words with me, ever again. Please. He hung up before she could respond. Cindy slumped in her chair and cried. Somehow, they made it through Friday night. They had pizza and watched a movie, even laughing a little when Michael explained why the family needed a dog. Saturday was more of the same, pretending everything was fine. A couple of times, they thought Sarah noticed something was off, but they worked harder to appear as a loving couple for their kids. The hardest moment came when Michael asked for a group hug on the beach. The lifeless look in Rick's eyes nearly broke Cindy, even though his hug felt firm. Sunday morning was filled with pancakes and lounging in pajamas. Rick told the kids that Mom and Dad were going out and Mrs. Bowling would look after them. Sarah and Michael weren't thrilled, but accepted it after Rick stood firm. They went to their rooms to change. At the park, Rick and Cindy walked until they found a quiet spot with a small picnic table. Rick sat facing the park, opposite Cindy. Just like him, Cindy thought. He always wants to see what's coming. I want you to talk first, if you don't mind, Rick began. If I start, I might lose control of my words. I promise I won't interrupt you. Say whatever you need to. Take 5 minutes or 50. I want you to have your say. If that's okay, please start when you're ready. Cindy hesitated, feeling like it was a negotiation. She never liked speaking first in such settings, but she knew this was her fault. Rick deserved to set the stage. Sure, Cindy replied, trying to sound supportive. I'm not sure where to start, Rick. I've been thinking about what to say since last Friday night. She stopped, unable to continue as the memory of the pain in his eyes overwhelmed her. You deserve the truth, and I'll try to give it to you. I've been with Bennett for about 8 months, she admitted. Rick put his head in his hands, but then looked up, silently urging her to go on. I've never been attracted to anyone else before Bennett. I didn't seek him out, and I didn't cheat because of something missing between us. While I didn't go looking for him, I didn't resist his friendship or flirting. Early on, I knew I was drawn to him, even as our business was thriving. She paused, searching for the right words. I'm not defending him, and I don't want to hurt you more, but the first time we were together, he stopped before our first kiss. He made me decide whether to continue or not. He didn't push me. He wanted it to be my choice. I kept going. I wasn't forced. I wanted it. Cindy's voice faltered. I don't know why I was attracted to him or why I did it, but I won't play the victim. Whatever happens between us is on me. She corrected herself before calling him a pet name. Sorry, Rick. I want to tell you I love you and beg for forgiveness. But I know I've kept part of my heart from you these last few months. You probably didn't notice, but a tiny part of me was somewhere else with Bennett. If it hadn't been, I wouldn't have done this. I lied to you and to myself. I told myself everything would be fine and that we'd grow old together. Cindy began, her voice trembling. I guess you start deceiving yourself before you can deceive others. I've betrayed everything I hold dear. I don't know how this will turn out or how it will affect the kids, but it can't be good, even if we can save our relationship. Finally, for this first talk, I need to say I'm deeply sorry for what I've done. Sorry isn't enough. I'm not sorry I got caught. I'm devastated for hurting the only person who loved me for who I am. No matter what happens to us, I need professional help. I've messed up more than I thought possible. I always thought I was a good person. I've discovered, maybe too late, that I'm not. I have flaws, and they are mine. I'm responsible. I'm really ashamed, and want you to know that. Rick's head was bowed, tears streaming down his cheeks. It was fortunate they were in a quiet place because his emotions were overwhelming. All the joy, love, friendship, and respect were gone. Now there was only sadness, grief, and emptiness. He wanted to shout and blame her, but he couldn't. Perhaps she would have preferred that over his soft sobs. It hit her hard again how much she had taken from him. After what felt like forever, Rick finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but steady. Cindy, I don't know if this is the last time we'll talk alone as husband and wife. I'm still trying to figure things out. Thank you for not lying to me more by saying it was only sex and nothing more. I appreciate your honesty, or at least I hope you're being honest, but I guess I'll never really know. Cindy put her head in her hands. The truth hurt deeply. She forced herself to look at him as he continued. You've been seeing Bennett for 8 months behind my back. I didn't know because I trusted you with everything. My love, my heart, my life. I know I can't trust you again. The fairy tale is over. There's no prince to save the day. I've never felt so hopeless in my life, and I hate it, but it's the only real feeling I know right now. I don't know what I'll do, but I won't divorce you now or anytime soon. Rick's voice faltered, but he kept going. A psychologist once said that if you're married with kids and thinking about a divorce, you should throw yourself in front of a bus. Kids can handle loss better than the feeling of being abandoned by divorce. That always made sense to me. I never thought I'd be in that spot myself. But pretending to be happy for the next 11 years until the twins graduate is impossible for me. I can't stand the thought of it. I can hardly look at you, let alone act like everything is fine. So 48 hours into this mess, I feel stuck and hopeless. I'm going to see a counselor this week to see if they can help. Cindy's face brightened slightly with hope, but Rick quickly added, I'm not doing it for you or our marriage, but for my sanity. I hope I can find a way to keep at least a small part of my dignity and love the kids well. Rick paused. Cindy asked cautiously, where will you and I stay? Should I get a hotel or a small apartment? I want us to stay in the house for now, Rick replied. I think if I have a business trip once a week, it will give me space. If you can go away for a couple of weekends like you usually do, I can handle it. What you do and who you see when you're away is up to you. I won't care right now, so if you find comfort with Bennett, do it. Rick, I have no plans to, Cindy began, but Rick held up a hand to stop her. Please, Cindy, you're talking to someone who doesn't care about what you do anymore. For the last 8 months, you didn't care about me or my life. Now I'm doing the same. Maybe the counselor can help me protect myself better. But until then, you're on your own. They both sat and cried for the next half hour without saying much. They didn't hold hands or comfort each other with words. Their arms were crossed, heads bowed, simply crying. Lori's warning had come true, and the cost was more than Cindy could bear. Little did she know the worst was yet to come. For the next month, their life became a strange routine. They acted normal in front of the kids. They attended Sarah's soccer games and Michael's karate lessons. They appeared convincing at the parent-teacher conference. Mrs. Snyder didn't notice anything amiss, but behind closed doors, everything was different. Cindy would look at Rick, hoping to talk, but he did everything he could to avoid her while holding himself together. Cindy took full responsibility, but it did nothing to lessen the hurt and shame Rick felt. Every week, Rick told the kids he had a business trip and left in the afternoon, returning the next evening. During these trips, he walked, thought, and planned for the future. He knew he needed to keep seeing his counselor for a long time. Rick was skilled at his job because he could see the benefits and drawbacks of investments better than most. Now, he applied that same analytical thinking to his personal life. What were the pros and cons of staying with Cindy? How would staying together or divorcing affect the kids, both now and in the future? And how would his firm react if they found out? Part of his professional reputation came from being a devoted husband and father. This too hung in the balance. Rick considered the future carefully, weighing every possibility. How would their finances work if they divorced or stayed married? What would Cindy do with her business? She couldn't continue working with Bennett's hotels. Did she even realize that? Rick wondered if Cindy was truly remorseful or just sorry she got caught. The pain of her betrayal was undeniable. But how would she confront what she had done and who she had become? What were his choices? Was there an alternative to divorce or staying together? This last question finally caught Rick's full attention. There was a third option. It was significant and challenging, but perhaps it could be the best for everyone, even him. On the third night of his business trip, Rick sat on the patio of the Courtyard Marriott, carefully thinking through his plan. It had to be flawless, with perfect execution. 2 weeks later, Rick's plan was still evolving, but he felt ready to talk to Cindy. He arranged for Mrs. Bowling to babysit and took Cindy to the park where they had first discussed her affair. Sitting at the same picnic table, they began another difficult conversation. Cindy, I know the last few weeks have been awful for both of us. I appreciate you giving me space and time to think. I want to share some things with you and then let you respond. Is that okay? Rick asked. Cindy nodded, so he continued. I don't want to rehash everything, especially the night I found you with Bennett. I've already told you how heartbroken I am. I'm not perfect, but I've always been 100% committed to us and our kids. I've never cheated on you, not even flirted with anyone else. I can't imagine loving anyone but you. I thought you felt the same. I believed we'd grow old together. I was wrong about your commitment to us and about our future together. Cindy's eyes filled with sorrow. Rick, she said softly, I know I don't deserve another chance, but I hope we can find a way to repair the hurt and betrayal I've caused. I don't want to give up on us. I'll work hard to make it right. Rick looked away momentarily before replying. I know you mean what you say, Cindy, and I've thought a lot about it. On one hand, maybe we could find enough forgiveness to stay together. Cindy's face brightened, but Rick continued. That won't work for me for 2 reasons. First, I don't think I can ever trust you again. Even if you told me the sky is blue and the grass is green, I wouldn't believe you. Every time you leave for work, I'll wonder if you're meeting someone else. Second, I can't be close to you without thinking of Bennett. You chose him over me, and you were with him without regard for our love or our family. I can't look at you without seeing him. Cindy's shoulders slumped. She knew Rick was right. She wanted to promise she would be faithful from now on, but she couldn't demand his trust. I want to fight for us, Rick. Don't you think we're worth fighting for? Rick's eyes flashed with anger, and Cindy shrank back. Taking a deep breath, he replied sharply, Fight for us? What do you think I've been doing every day since we got married? Working hard, spending time with our kids, remembering the things you love, and making sure you had them in your life. I've always fought for us. How did you fight for us, Cindy? You chose to be with Bennett Davis. I'm not the one who gave up on us. You did that 8 months ago, and now you're hurt because I won't pretend it didn't happen. Rick sighed deeply, and they both began to cry. There are so many questions I want to ask you, Cindy, but there's no point in asking someone who has lied to me over and over. How could I trust your answers? Maybe you're sorry, but maybe you're just saying that so you can see Bennett again. I want to ask if you've learned anything from this, but no matter what you say, I'll think the main lesson you learned is how not to get caught next time. I long for the heart-to-heart talks we used to have, but that couple we once were is gone. You destroyed us with your cheating and lies. There's no turning back. We can only move forward with the best solution for everyone. Rick's voice grew heavier as he continued. I realized recently that our night out at the Ritz was after you'd been with Bennett. You spent the weekend with him and then came home, letting me wine and dine you, thinking you were loyal. You must have laughed inside, seeing me as a fool, proud of my wife who was anything but faithful. How stupid I was. But no more. Cindy's heart broke further. She had truly hurt the man she once promised to love forever. He had fought for their relationship every day, while she had selfishly torn it apart. Just a year ago, she loved him dearly, but her own desires had shattered everything. Are you going to divorce me, Rick? She asked softly, finally finding the courage to speak. No, Cindy, Rick replied. I'm not going to divorce you, but I won't stay married either. I'm working on a solution that I think will be best for everyone. It will hurt, but I believe it's the only answer. I will explain everything in a few weeks. Rick had stopped asking Cindy for her opinions or thoughts. Honestly, I don't trust you to care about me or our kids, he said bluntly. Once you understand my plan, you'll make your own choices. I won't control you, but how will I know if you don't tell me now? Cindy asked, confused. Rick met her eyes, his expression calm but resigned. You'll know, he said simply. They spoke a little longer, with Cindy gently trying to get more details, but Rick remained firm. My friend Lori once warned me that if we played this game, we'd have to pay the price. I guess she was right, he added. Rick was taken aback to learn that Lori had known about the affair and had even tried to warn Cindy. It deepened his hurt. Before you were with Bennett, you were warned, and you still didn't stop. You didn't tell me you were struggling. You just kept going, Rick said, his voice breaking as tears welled up in his eyes. Cindy couldn't hold back her tears either. Covering her face with her hands, she cried, hoping Rick would comfort her. Instead, he stood with his arms crossed, his tone cold and final. The time to pay has come, he said quietly. 2 weeks and 4 days later, Rick left for another of his weekly business trips. He hugged and kissed the kids goodbye, looking sadder than usual. Cindy wondered if saying goodbye, even temporarily, was becoming harder for him. As Rick suggested, Cindy had been sleeping better, aided by melatonin and an occasional glass of wine. That evening, Mrs. Bowling stayed with the kids, giving Cindy the chance to rest. At 5:30 the next morning, Cindy was startled awake by her ringing phone. The caller ID showed 911. Hello? Cindy answered groggily, trying to wake up. Is this Cindy Thomas, wife of Richard Thomas? Came a professional voice. Yes, this is Cindy. Is everything all right? She asked, now fully awake. Let me confirm your address. 918 South El Camino Court, correct? Yes. What's happened? Cindy demanded, her voice rising. What kind of car does your husband drive? The caller asked. A dark gray 2019 Lexus ES. Why? What's going on? I'm very sorry to inform you that your husband was in a car accident on California Highway 79 near Warner Springs, the voice said. Oh no, is he okay? Is he in the hospital? Cindy's voice cracked with panic. I'm deeply sorry, but the crash was fatal. His body is being taken to UC San Diego Medical Center. I'm so sorry for your loss. Cindy froze, unable to move as the words sank in. Then, all at once, she broke down, screaming into her pillow. For nearly an hour, she sobbed uncontrollably. When she finally gathered her thoughts, she realized she had to tell the kids, call her mother, and inform Rick's parents in Denver. She needed to get to UCSD Medical Center immediately, but wasn't sure she could drive. Still in a daze, Cindy splashed water on her face, dressed quickly, and tied her hair back in a ponytail. Just as she was heading out the door, the doorbell rang. She thought it was strange for someone to visit so early. Standing on the porch was Brad Stanton, the family lawyer and one of Rick's closest friends. He looked disheveled and deeply concerned. Cindy, I heard the news about Rick's accident, Brad said softly. I saw it on the early news. I'm so sorry. Hearing his words, Cindy broke down again, collapsing into Brad's arms. He held her briefly before Mrs. Bowling hurried over, still in her bathrobe, with a worried expression. Brad explained the situation to her as Cindy wept. Mrs. Bowling, too, began to cry, but took Cindy into her arms for comfort. After a few moments, Cindy pulled herself together. I need to go to the hospital. I have to see Rick, she said, her voice trembling. Mrs. Bowling agreed to stay with the kids and get them to school, promising to tell them a gentle story about why their mom had to leave. Brad insisted on driving Cindy to the hospital. Within minutes, they were on the road. As they drove, Cindy's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and texts. She called her mother, who promised to catch the next flight out. Cindy also made the gut-wrenching call to Rick's parents, Connor and Lily Thomas, who said they would arrive by the time the kids returned from school. After turning off her phone, Cindy stared out at the Pacific Ocean, tears silently streaming down her face. The next 5 days were a blur of grief and responsibilities. Cindy had to explain Rick's death to the kids with the support of grandparents and Mrs. Bowling. She coordinated with the police, insurance companies, and funeral services while juggling her event planning clients. The to-do list felt endless. One question gnawed at Cindy's mind. Why had Rick been over an hour outside of town on a desolate road so early in the morning? The authorities confirmed that he had been speeding, but toxicology reports showed no alcohol or drugs in his system. The mystery deepened, leaving Cindy to grapple with her own guilt and unanswered questions. Rick's stomach contents revealed he'd had steak, salad, and potatoes the night before, accompanied only by water. Cindy couldn't make sense of it. Meanwhile, Bennett debated texting Cindy after hearing the news, but ultimately decided against it. He feared any message from him would only worsen her pain. Lori, in the middle of a meeting with a new client, heard about Rick's death. Her assistant, Stacy, noticed the pain in Lori's expression, but also saw that she wasn't entirely surprised. Lori chose not to attend the funeral. On Friday morning, Rick's funeral was held, and it seemed everyone who had known him was there. Cindy was overwhelmed by the heartfelt stories shared about him. She had always known Rick was remarkable, but hearing these accounts deepened her guilt. She couldn't help but wonder if her affair with Bennett had led to Rick's untimely death. That question would soon haunt her even more. Late Sunday afternoon, Brad Stanton, the family lawyer and one of Rick's closest friends, arrived at the house. He briefly spoke with Cindy's mom and in-laws before they quickly took the kids out to give Cindy some privacy. When Cindy came downstairs, she found Brad sitting at the kitchen table with an expression that suggested he had something significant to share. She offered him something to drink, but he declined. "Cindy, please sit down," he said. Brad began carefully. "Cindy, I need to tell you 2 things before I hand you something. First, I'm here as Rick's lawyer, not just as a friend. Second, I had no idea about what was going to happen to Rick." Cindy gasped, unsure of what he meant. How could anyone know about an accident before it happens? She asked. Brad clarified. Rick gave me instructions, both in person and in writing, in case anything happened to him. He insisted everything be handled legally and even paid me in advance, though I offered to do it as his friend. I don't know the contents of this letter. It's from Rick to you. My job is to give it to you and leave before you read it. Brad handed over the envelope, noticing Cindy's hands trembling. What else did Rick tell you to do? She asked. Brad hesitated. I'm sorry, Cindy. What Rick told me is confidential. He made it clear I couldn't share anything beyond what he instructed. Standing up, Brad offered a quiet apology and left without waiting for her reply. Alone now, Cindy opened the envelope, her heart racing. She unfolded the letter and began to read. See, by now, you know I'm gone, and the funeral is over. Brad has given you this letter and left. The kids are likely with my parents or your mom, as planned. They know not to come home for a couple of hours because this will be hard for you to process. This is the third option, Cindy, the best path I could find. I loved you with all my heart, but you took that away. This is what I could do with what little I had left. 1. 2 weeks ago, I purchased 3 acres of land by the lake at Eagle's Nest. This explains why I was on Highway 79 the morning of the accident. The story is that I bought the land to surprise you and the kids, a place for us to build a retreat and enjoy summers and long weekends. 2. This is a lie. The land purchase is just a cover story. Whatever happens, you must stick to it. If the insurance companies suspect anything unusual, they won't release the money. I drove to the land to check on it and decided to return home early for a 9:30 meeting with a client. That's why I was speeding and lost control. The insurance companies might investigate, but they won't find anything unusual. Brad will handle everything if you stick to this story. 3. I revised my will in the past few weeks. 90% of my assets, roughly $3 million, will go into a trust for the kids. They can use it for college, graduate school, or access it when they turn 30, split evenly. Brad will oversee these details. The remaining 10%, around $300,000, is for you. I would have left you nothing if I could, but you need money to care for the kids while pretending to grieve for me. Regarding the kids, I told you once about the psychologist's advice that death is easier for children than divorce. I researched it further and found it to be true. That's why I couldn't divorce you, Cindy. I couldn't do that to our children. They may hate me someday if they learn the truth, but I hope someone helps them understand how unfair life can be. 5. I can't dictate what you do with your life moving forward. Maybe you'll go back to Bennett, or maybe there's someone else. Whatever you do, think of the kids first. They'll be out of the house in 9 or 10 years. Until then, keep your lovers away from them. 6. Finally, I have one small favor. Cindy stopped reading, her hands trembling as tears streamed down her face. She braced herself for whatever came next, but she already knew this letter would forever change the course of her life. Rick's stomach contents revealed he'd had steak, salad, and potatoes the night before, accompanied only by water. Cindy couldn't make sense of it. Meanwhile, Bennett debated texting Cindy after hearing the news, but ultimately decided against it. He feared any message from him would only worsen her pain. Lori, in the middle of a meeting with a new client, heard about Rick's death. Her assistant, Stacy, noticed the pain in Lori's expression, but also saw that she wasn't entirely surprised. Lori chose not to attend the funeral. On Friday morning, Rick's funeral was held, and it seemed everyone who had known him was there. Cindy was overwhelmed by the heartfelt stories shared about him. She had always known Rick was remarkable, but hearing these accounts deepened her guilt. She couldn't help but wonder if her affair with Bennett had led to Rick's untimely death. That question would soon haunt her even more. Late Sunday afternoon, Brad Stanton, the family lawyer and one of Rick's closest friends, arrived at the house. He briefly spoke with Cindy's mom and in-laws before they quickly took the kids out to give Cindy some privacy. When Cindy came downstairs, she found Brad sitting at the kitchen table with an expression that suggested he had something significant to share. She offered him something to drink, but he declined. "Cindy, please sit down," he said. Brad began carefully. "Cindy, I need to tell you 2 things before I hand you something. First, I'm here as Rick's lawyer, not just as a friend. Second, I had no idea about what was going to happen to Rick. Cindy gasped, unsure what he meant. How could anyone know about an accident before it happens? She asked. Brad clarified, Rick gave me instructions, both in person and in writing, in case anything happened to him. He insisted everything be handled legally and even paid me in advance, though I offered to do it as his friend. I don't know the contents of this letter. It's from Rick to you. My job is to give it to you and leave before you read it. Brad handed over the envelope, noticing Cindy's hands trembling. What else did Rick tell you to do? She asked. Brad hesitated. I'm sorry, Cindy. What Rick told me is confidential. He made it clear I couldn't share anything beyond what he instructed. Standing up, Brad offered a quiet apology and left without waiting for her reply. Alone now, Cindy opened the envelope, her heart racing. She unfolded the letter and began to read. Cindy, by now, you know I'm gone, and the funeral is over. Brad has given you this letter and left. The kids are likely with my parents or your mom, as planned. They know not to come home for a couple of hours because this will be hard for you to process. This is the third option, Cindy, the best path I could find. I loved you with all my heart, but you took that away. This is what I could do with what little I had left. 1. 2 weeks ago, I purchased 3 acres of land by the lake at Eagle's Nest. This explains why I was on Highway 79 the morning of the accident. The story is that I bought the land to surprise you and the kids, a place for us to build a retreat and enjoy summers and long weekends. 2. This is a lie. The land purchase is just a cover story. Whatever happens, you must stick to it. If the insurance companies suspect anything unusual, they won't release the money. I drove to the land to check on it and decided to return home early for a 9:30 meeting with a client. That's why I was speeding and lost control. The insurance companies might investigate, but they won't find anything unusual. Brad will handle everything if you stick to this story. 3. I revised my will in the past few weeks. 90% of my assets, roughly $3 million, will go into a trust for the kids. They can use it for college, graduate school, or access it when they turn 30, split evenly. Brad will oversee these details. The remaining 10%, around $300,000, is for you. I would have left you nothing if I could, but you need money to care for the kids while pretending to grieve for me. 4. Regarding the kids, I told you once about the psychologist's advice that death is easier for children than divorce. I researched it further and found it to be true. That's why I couldn't divorce you, Cindy. I couldn't do that to our children. They may hate me someday if they learn the truth, but I hope someone helps them understand how unfair life can be. 5. I can't dictate what you do with your life moving forward. Maybe you'll go back to Bennett, or maybe there's someone else. Whatever you do, think of the kids first. They'll be out of the house in 9 or 10 years. Until then, keep your lovers away from them. 6. Finally, I have one small favor. Cindy stopped reading, her hands trembling as tears streamed down her face. She braced herself for whatever came next, but she already knew this letter would forever change the course of her life. Cindy, when you finish reading this letter, please burn it until there's nothing left. If the insurance companies find it, it will ruin our children's future. Read it a couple more times, but if I ever meant anything to you, destroy this completely. Maybe someday, somehow, you'll hear from me again. Rick. Cindy collapsed onto the floor, sobbing Rick's name over and over. She felt the full weight of her betrayal and the consequences it had brought, crushing her completely. For an hour, she lay there, consumed by her emotions, unable to move. Finally, she mustered the strength to sit up, rereading the letter twice more, letting its words cut her deeper each time. Then, with trembling hands, she walked to the fireplace, lit a match, and burned the letter until only ashes remained. She stood there staring at the embers, feeling as though a part of her had been burned away too. It was as if the piper had finally come to collect his due. Epilogue. It had been 12 years since Rick Thomas's death on California Highway 79. In truth, Rick had felt dead the moment he caught Cindy with another man, betraying him and their family. What followed was just the aftermath. Cindy never remarried, nor did she share Rick's secret about the true nature of his death. The $300,000 Rick left her sustained their family while she processed her grief and guilt. It took her over a year to return to work And when she did, she found she could no longer manage weddings or reunions. They were too painful. Instead, she transitioned to business event planning and eventually built a successful career in the field. She dated occasionally, but never found anyone like Rick. Deep down, she saw herself as broken and questioned whether she would cheat again if given the chance. Her children, Michael and Sarah, urged her to move on and find happiness. "Dad would want you to be happy," they told her. She nodded at their words but thought bitterly to herself. "He always wanted me to be happy, and I used that as my excuse to destroy him." The guilt never left her. Bennett reached out once, about 4 months after Rick's death, sending Cindy a short note. True to Lori's prediction, their romantic relationship had ended, but Bennett still cared for her in his way. "I'm so deeply sorry. B." Cindy read the message, hesitated, and then replied, "So am I, goodbye." They never spoke again. By the time Michael and Sarah were 20, both had graduated high school and gone on to college. Michael, outgoing and full of energy, studied hospitality and marketing at USC, inspired by his love of connecting with people. Sarah, more analytical and reserved, followed in her father's footsteps, studying economics at Stanford. Both children honored their father's memory in their own ways. While the pain of losing him never fully faded, they found ways to live meaningful lives. One warm spring morning, Cindy sat at her desk in her small but comfortable condo, sipping hot black coffee as she reviewed a contract for an upcoming corporate retreat. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. When she opened the door, Brad Stanton stood there. "Brad, it's been a while," Cindy said warmly, hugging him. "It's good to see you, Cindy," Brad replied, though his expression was serious. "Can I come in? There's something I need to talk to you about." Cindy noticed the tension in his voice. "Of course. Would you like some coffee?" "No, thank you. I can't stay long." They sat at the kitchen table. Brad looked directly at Cindy and said, "Cindy, today would have been Rick's 45th birthday." Cindy winced, realizing she had forgotten the date. She made a mental note to call her kids later. Before Rick passed, he updated his will and left instructions for what he wanted done if anything happened to him. Brad continued. "He never told me why, but he was clear about what I needed to do. And this morning, I received something unexpected." "What do you mean?" Cindy asked, a chill running down her spine. "This morning, a courier delivered an envelope to my door at 6 a.m. The return address was a P.O. box in Austin, Texas." Brad paused, taking a deep breath. Inside was a 12-page typed letter from Rick, along with a short handwritten note from someone named Lori. Cindy froze, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The note said, "Please read carefully and follow the instructions." Then I started reading Rick's letter. The first line? Classic Rick. Brad's voice softened as he recited the words. "Hey buddy, get up. I need you to help me finish some unfinished business." "Yes, I know it's 6 a.m., but I paid extra to make sure this arrived on time." Brad paused, glancing at Cindy, whose expression was a mixture of shock and dread. "Cindy, there's more. A lot more. But I need you to be ready for what comes next." Brad didn't elaborate further, but his expression revealed his disgust. "Rick shared everything with me, Cindy. The entire story," he said, his voice sharp. "I can't believe you did something so cruel to a man who loved you so completely." Brad stood and handed Cindy a white envelope with her name scrawled across the front. "This is from Rick. I don't want to speak to you again. I'll stay in touch with Michael and Sarah because they're Rick's children. If I see you in public, I'll be polite for their sake, not yours. Do you understand?" Cindy's voice wavered, but she managed to reply, "Yes, I understand." As Brad turned to leave, he muttered under his breath, "Selfish person." The envelope sat on the table like a living entity, daring Cindy to confront its contents. Recognizing Rick's handwriting, she hesitated. It took her several minutes to summon the courage, but at last, she opened it and began to read. "Cindy, it has been 12 years since the events that led us to this day. In my last letter, I mentioned that someday you might hear from me again. I also said that maybe someday the kids would learn the truth about what happened to their family. That day has arrived. 1. When I discovered that Lori had tried to dissuade you from continuing your affair with Bennett and you ignored her advice, I turned to her for help. She was the only person I could trust with my plans. Lori begged me not to go through with them, even offering to let me stay with her in Austin, kids in tow. She was a woman of true character. I often wondered what life might have been like if I'd met her instead of you. 2. Lori agreed to help me with one critical condition. She would hold on to this letter until today, my 45th birthday. At 6 a.m. this morning, she and Brad delivered the notes as instructed. Brad's letter contained instructions to pass this one on to you. Lori and Brad were instrumental in ensuring my plan stayed intact. 3. As of this morning, Michael and Sarah have also received their own letters. They know everything now, every painful detail. I left out nothing. They are adults, and I believe they deserve to know the truth about their mother and father. The statute of limitations for insurance fraud in California is 4 years, so their inheritance is secure. They might despise me for my choices, but Brad and Lori will help them understand. Good luck explaining the lies you've told them for the last 12 years. 4. If your mother and my parents are still alive, they've received similar notes. The same applies to the partners at my firm. 5. Regarding Bennett. Today's edition of the Santa Barbara News Press includes a full-page advertisement exposing your affair. It details how you and Bennett planned beautiful weddings while betraying me. The ad concludes with a warning to others to avoid doing business with him. I don't expect to destroy him completely, but I hope it makes his life significantly harder. Perhaps the two of you can find comfort in each other's misery. For reference, your name is mentioned, so I imagine you'll have a few uncomfortable conversations with friends and colleagues. 6. 13 years ago, I believed we were happy. I thought we had built something real. Now I know it was all a lie, a sad, hollow lie. So, Cindy, you had your fun, and now it's time to face the music. Rick. As Cindy read the final line, her phone began to ring incessantly. Panic set in as she realized her carefully maintained facade was unraveling. 6 months later, all 3 of Bennett's boutique hotel properties had been sold at a significant loss. The Templeton Group acquired them, leaving Bennett Davis financially ruined at the age of 53. Reflecting on Rick's calculated plan, a passage from Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado echoed in the background. In the end, I would have my revenge. This was firmly decided. I must not only punish, but punish without getting caught. Hey audience, if you enjoyed this story and want more gripping tales, don't forget to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss out on our next thrilling adventure.